Good morning, my name is Karen and I'm going to show you how to make a face mask that we all should be wearing when we go out in public nowadays. What I like about my particular pattern is it is made with a pocket into which you can insert a filter that can be disposed of, and then you can wash your mask and go on to the next use. This was one of my early prototypes. I'm doing this by selfie, unfortunately, so I hope you can see everything. Here's another one. And let's talk first about the materials that you'll need. What you will need is elastic. When I first made my early mask, I had some 1 1/4 inch elastic hanging around because I'm a sewer and a quilter, and I used that on my first bunch of masks and used it all up, so I had to source more elastic, which is becoming difficult to find. But I actually found some of this jewelry elastic on Amazon, and that seems to be working out pretty well. This mask has it. You will also need cotton fabric. Because I'm a quilter, I have lots of extra cotton fabrics hanging around. You do want to use a good quality fabric because some of the stuff that you buy from the chain stores is very thin weave. It tends, sometimes the dyes will run when you wash them, and you don't want that to be happening. Let's see, you'll also need a lining fabric. Now, a lining fabric can be either more of the same fabric, more of the cotton that you used on the outer, that you'll use on the outer part of the mask. I've actually used this bonded spun polyester pillow protector fabric that I had, and that I like this because I don't have to make extra seams in the middle when I turn it so that I can make the pocket. I like it also because it's inexpensive and it seems to mimic what you find in a surgical mask. But if you don't have that, that's fine. Even, let's see, even a good quality muslin will work. Just make sure it's not too loosely woven. Then you'll need some twist ties. And again, the first couple I made using the ones I had in my kitchen pantry, but then I ordered some on Amazon. You can just put in twist ties in the search bar, and I got these 5-inch twist ties and a nice packet of them, and those were relatively inexpensive. I sew with gray thread in general because then I don't have to change my thread color. It seems to blend with most fabrics unless I'm using a really, really dark fabric. And then I also would suggest, if you can, let's put that down there. These clover clips are quite handy, and you'll see that I use these to put my pleats in place before I sew them. But barring that, your regular sewing pins will also work. Okay, so what are we going to need? What we will need is a piece of cotton fabric that has been cut 7 inches along the side by 10 inches. So we have a nice rectangle 7 by 10. If you are a quilter and you're familiar with the term fat quarter, which happens to be a 1/4 yard of fabric, but instead of being 9 inches by 42 inches, it's a 1/2 yard cut and then another 1/2 yard. So it looks something like this, kind of almost square. It's about 18 by 21 inches. If you are making the pocket, if you're not going to make a pocket and you're just going to make a mask, that's fine, and we'll talk about that too, in which case your lining fabric would also be cut 7 by 10 inches. But if you're making the pocket, take your spun polyester and cut a piece that is 10 inches by 5 inches and 10 inches by 3 inches. So you have two pieces here. So instead of being 7 by 10, it's 8 by 10 when it's put together, because we're going to slightly overlap it to form the pocket. Obviously, otherwise you would just cut 7 by 10. So we've got that. Let's see. 3 by 10. Your elastic, you'll want to cut, you're going to make 2 ties to fit over the ears, and they have to be 7 inches long. Now, in the case of this jewelry elastic, I actually used 2 on each side, so I needed to cut 4 lengths. I just want this to be sturdy. I don't want it to fall apart. If you're just using regular 1 1/4 inch or 1 inch, this is not 1 1/4 inch, I apologize. This is 3/8 of an inch wide elastic. If you're using 1/4 inch elastic or 3/8 inch elastic, you just need 1 piece on each side. Let's see, so we've got the elastic, everything's good, and let's start to sew. So what I'm going to do is put the larger piece. Oh, one more thing. I pre-wash my fabrics. Normally, especially if you're a quilter, we don't pre-wash. I pre-wash my fabrics because I want the mask ready to wear out of the gate. Wash it on gentle cycle, hot water. You're going to get some of this stringy stuff coming out after, so I wouldn't put a gazillion pieces in the wash at once, but do wash it. You can even wash this, that's fine. So we're pre-washed and we're ready to go. So what I'm going to do is put the larger piece of lining on the top of the fabric, right there, along the edge, and I'm going to sew, and I suggest about a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but just to make it easy, I'm going to use the edge of my presser foot to run along. It makes it go a lot faster. I don't have to worry about locking in the beginning and the end of the sewing because I'm going to go right down, and eventually we're going to be sewing this way, so that will lock in the seam. Alrighty. And then we're going to put the smaller one on the bottom, and if you'll notice, it's right sides together, so the nice side of my fabric is facing up toward me as I sew. Alrighty. Now what I'm going to do is place my elastic in place, and for that I'm going to get ready with a couple of these clover clips so I don't have to pin, and that these work especially well. If you're not a sewer and you don't have clover clips hanging around, you could use binder clips, office binder clips. They work as well too. So what I want to do is I want to take 2 pieces of my elastic, and I want to butt it up, so overlapping the bottom, on the top where the larger, the 5-inch piece is, so along the top, and it's going to go like so. And it's sticking out of the side just a wee bit. Let's get it in there. Let's see if I can bring this closer to the camera. So you can see that the elastic is sticking out just a little bit, not a lot. It doesn't have to be a lot, just like so. And I'll clip that down. And I butted the elastic right up against the line where I had sewn before. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. So you can see right there and right there. Now what I'm going to do to get that elastic sewn down is I'm going to sew right along the edge here, right here. But I'm not going to go all the way down to the end of the piece. I'm only going to do about 2 inches. And I'm going to take a couple back stitches at the beginning to lock it in. And as I go over the elastic, I'm going to go back and forth 3 or 4 times because I want that elastic to hold and last. And I will do the same thing to the other side. Now what I have to do is get this other end of the elastic into my mask. So I'm going to pull it down. Now I'm working along the shorter edge of my piece here. Pull it down, scoot it in there so it's butted up against the sewing line of where the lining was joined to the front of the mask. This is a little trickier because, of course, the elastic is stretchable and it's shorter than the side. Clip it down to hold it in place. Get the one on the other side ready to sew. Same thing. Let's see if I can turn this around. I'm working along the shorter side of my mask. Clip it down. So we're like this. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to sew that elastic down, but I'm not going to sew all the way. Just want to get that elastic down so it's not going to go anywhere, and go back and forth. It's part of the problem with the surgical masks that are out there is because they're disposable and meant for one-time usage, they're not sewn down to last. But we want this to last. Okay, so now we're ready to just about finish things up here. Let me turn my iron on. I'll get it so it's nice and hot. Now what I need to do is to sew the rest of the lining down along the shorter edge. And I want the overlap of these two pieces, the lining pieces. And so we want to keep the top lining piece, which is the larger one, overlapping the bottom lining piece. This time I am going to lock in my stitches at the beginning and the end of my sewing line by back stitching a little bit. Make sure that those lining pieces are nice and flat as they overlap. And that. And do the same to the other side. We're working along the shorter edge, the 7-inch edge. Here. Now I'm going to stop and just talk a minute about if you are not sewing with a pocket, then what you would have to do is take your lining piece, no pocket, so the lining and the top would be the same size, 7 by 10. You would sew them right sides together and you would go all the way around, leaving about a 2-inch opening at the top of your mask to turn it. This is important. If you are using regular cotton that tends to unravel as a lining, but you are making the pocket, then I would suggest that you add about 1/4 of an inch, not much more than that, to one side and sew it on, but on this side that's going to form the pocket, you want to turn that 1/4 inch in before you sew it down. Sew that tight, shut, 1/4 of an inch, iron it down and sew it in. Same thing on the other side of the pocket, extra 1/4 inch. So instead of cutting this 5 by 10, you would cut it 5 1/4 by 10. Instead of cutting this one 3 by 10, you would cut it 3 1/4 by 10. Stitch that down so that you have a clean edge so that when you wash your mask, it's not going to unravel. But I didn't need to do that. What I'm going to do before I turn my mask right side out is I'm going to just kind of clip these corners. Not clipping the elastic off, I'm just kind of clipping them, making little dog ears. Put that closer so you can see. Not absolutely necessary to do that, but that's just a sewing thing. Now I'm going to turn this so that it is right side out. Yeah, it looks something like this so far. And what I'm going to do is press this and get it nice and flat. Now, if you have used this spun bonded polyester, I'm going to give you a warning. When you press it, do not get that polyester on your iron. It will form a gummy thing on your iron, on the bottom of your iron, and you'll have to use wax paper or an iron cleaner to get it off. And even I found with a Teflon pressing sheet, that didn't help. It still got on the iron. So we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to iron this down. Pay special attention to those corners. See, I kind of scrunched my polyester up on the back there, right over the flap. Got a little scrunchy, I wasn't careful, so I'll straighten that out. Turn it back to the right side after it's straightened out. Press, give it a press again, so it's not scooched up. Okay, that's better. So here we go. Now what I want to do, I told you these masks are meant to last, is I want to reinforce this elastic again. So I'm going to stick this in my machine, and I'm just going to run back and forth on a diagonal stitch a couple times. I'll show you that just a second. Cut this away. So you can see I've got this diagonal stitching right here to reinforce the elastic, and I'm going to do that in all four corners. Two. Three. And one more corner. My whole machine going here. Go. Flip those loose threads. Okay, this is probably, we're almost to the end here. This is probably the trickiest part. I have to put pleats in. Oh, sorry, not quite yet. So the next thing is I just have a strip of fabric here, and I cut this, let's see, this is 1.5 inches. So I want this to be 1.5 by a little over 5 inches, not much more than that. So let's make a cut there. This is for inserting my twist ties so that we've got some nose protection, that we can form the mask. There's my completed one here. So we can form the mask over the nose to make it a little bit tighter. This is not by any means going to be the kind that they use in commercial masks, but it does help. So what I want to do is I want to put a little pocket on the back into which I can insert my twist ties. You see that? So I'm going to the top of my mask. That's the side of the mask that has the wider lining piece on it. And I'm just going to kind of place this strip of 5.25 by 1.5 inch fabric on the top of the mask, on the good side of the mask, and right sides together. And I'm going to sew this onto the mask at the top. It's kind of centered at the top. And this is barely going to even be 1/4 inch. I just want to get a line of stitching here as close to the edge as I can without missing anything. So you back stitch to lock it in. And I'm right at the edge. The edges are butted together. Lock it in. I should have mentioned, start sewing at the beginning and the end. Do not sew right up to the end. We don't want to have a raw edge sitting out here, so I have to unsew where I started because I wasn't paying attention myself. And you can in fact do this beforehand. So what I want to do at the beginning is turn this little bit of seam allowance. Let's see if I can hold this up. This is not easy doing a selfie. Turn that little bit in, so I've got a little bit of an allowance there, so when it's turned, you'll see we won't have a raw edge that can fall apart in the wash. So you know, if you want to, if you're a little reluctant about, you know, your 1/4 inches or whatever, then cut this strip of fabric 5 1/2, 5 3/4 inches, and then you'll have plenty of room for turning. And I'm just going to give that a little press down so it stays there. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side of that strip, and I'll show you that as soon as I've pressed it down. And this, you know, you don't have to be perfect. These are not fancy. Believe me, if somebody's coming up to it, you know, look at your stitching on your mask, they're way too close to you. It's not social distancing. So now we've got this strip that looks like that. Now, I should tell you that on previous masks, I've actually had some ultra suede fabric, which of course is kind of like this bonded polyester. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't run, it doesn't have raw edges. And I've just used that and sewn it directly on the back of the mask and for the insert, and that went really fast. But I have to make about 30 of these masks because I have orders coming in, and I have to do some for a disabled home. And so, you know, I don't have that much ultra suede, and ultra suede's really expensive. So this works just as well. So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to turn it over. So it's going to go over to the back, flip into the back like so. And again, I'm going to just, I'll iron this down. Let's iron this down next so it stays over, flap to the back. Be careful not to get your hot iron on your polyester, because that can be disastrous to your iron. So it goes like that. Now I've got a raw edge of fabric here, so I'm going to turn that under. Like so. And I'm going to use my clips to hold this down after I've turned it under with my fingers. If you don't have clips, you can just pin it down. So now it looks like this. So no raw edges. And I'm going to sew, right now I'm going to sew right along here. And when I get to the end, I'm going to turn and sew it up here on this side, but I'm going to leave this side open, because this is the side where I want to be able to insert my twist ties, and I want to be able to pull those out when I wash my mask. So leave one end open. Needle down, turn. Back stitch. Twist ties. You know, if you have enough of them, I like to use 2 in a mask, because that gives it just a little bit more ability to form that nose shape, that nose covering. And scoop those in there. You see mine kind of disappeared in there because it was longer, so if yours does that, and when you want to pull it out, you can just use the tweezers and to pull them out when it's time to wash that mask. Okay. Now we're ready to put the pleats in, and this is kind of the tricky part. What we want to do is we want to get 3 pleats in our mask. 1, 2, 3. The pleated edges I want facing the bottom, so I'm going to be working from the top of my mask and going to the bottom. You're going to take that first pleat is about 1 inch down. This gets a little tricky, and you have to kind of fiddle with it a little bit. So let's see if I can put this on the side of the machine so you can see it a little better. So that looks pretty good, and I'll show you the sides in a second. I'm going to clip it down on both sides. Clip down the other side. Okay, then I'm going to take that second pleat. Remember, we're getting 3, and I'm just kind of eyeballing it at the moment. So I may make adjustments so they look kind of equal. And one more. This one's probably, I probably could have made that first pleat up a little higher, but this is okay. It's going to serve its purpose. And what I'm going to do is press this in, press this down. It looks like one side is a little tighter than the other side, so let's see if we can scooch this and fix it. And what I'm aiming for when this is all pressed down is a mask that is about 3.5 inches when the pleats are in. 3.5 inches wide. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. No one is going to come up to you and examine your sewing. Like I said, if they do, they're way too close to you. So what I was aiming for is about 3.5 inches wide on this mask. And then we're going to just take a line of stitching this side, take a line of stitching that side. Now, and when you stitch, you're going to find that it wants to, you have to either remove your pin or your clips if you're going to get that stitching in. And I try to really hold down with my left hand. I'm right-handed. I try to really hold that down so that it doesn't move. Those pleats don't move and open up. There might be a little bit of slippage, but try to do as little as possible. I find that's more of a problem with pins than with these clips. Backtrack. One side. You can see the stitching there on that side. Now we're going to do this side. Again, hold it down, keep it tight. keep it tight. That pleat's going to want to open up as you're sewing. You don't want that to happen. Now give this a good press again. Let's get rid of these stray threads. And we'll talk about filters. And our mask is done and ready to wear. Before I talk about filters, I should tell you that I've seen some people online who say, you know, these irritate the ear after a while if you're wearing it a long time, or if you need it to be a little tighter. One thing you can do after you get it around your head is just take some, you know, a strip of fabric or whatever. It can be, you know, cut up an old t-shirt and cut up a strip of fabric and just make it long enough and tie it back there with the two ends together behind your head and tie a bow and you're tight and you're good. So we've got our pocket is in here. When we open our mask up, we have a pocket. Now, I was really had to think long and hard about what to use for a filter. And obviously you don't want anything that's fiberglass because that's not good to inhale, so that wouldn't solve our problem at all. And I came across these furnace filters that were not fiberglass. They're a polypropylene, I think it's called. And it comes on a big sheet, 20 by 20 by 1, that looks like this. And what I do is I kind of peel away as much of this white stuff on the back as I can. And then I cut a little filter that is about 5 inches by 4 inches. And I can insert that into my mask. Get it nice and straight in the middle. And I did test these out. It is still nice and breathable, and it works quite well. And if I'm particularly, you know, exposed to somebody, or somebody in the household has a cold and you want them to, you know, avoid, and I guess cold viruses are still much more common than anything else, though I don't know how, if we're all staying at home, we're even getting a cold virus, but it'll protect them if they sneeze or whatever. So that works quite well, and you can throw this away when you feel it's been soiled enough and be done with it. The other thing I found was, what else could I use? Because not everybody has access to this, or you don't want to buy a big box of this. I'm making so many masks that I include 3 of these with every mask. So, but what happens when you run out and you're done? I put on my thinking cap and I was like, what would be good? And then I was like, a coffee filter. Of course, why not? It's not porous, highly disposable. So I took one and I cut that up into a 5 by 4 inch square. And that is insertable and disposable and inexpensive and something most people have in their houses. And I even went so far as to cut 2 of them up and test it out. And yes, even 2 is still breathable. Okay, sources. Like I said, elastic I sourced from Amazon. Good luck. I think even the sewing stores are out of regular elastic. But you can try and see what you can come up with. The spun bonded polyester, that's the stuff that I use for the lining. That came from a place called Sailrite. And here's the website, sailrite.com. If you want to write this down, I'll try and put this in the comments as well so you can see. That is what it is called. It comes 60 inches wide. So 1 yard is going to get you a lot. I had 4 yards handy because I also sew pillows, and I was using it for the inner portion of the pillow to put the stuffing in before I put my pretty fabric on top. But so I had quite a bit of it. Now, somebody did tell me back in early March when I first started making these that Sailrite was out of this particular fabric. But, you know, check back. Maybe they've got it restocked. I haven't looked. There's the item number if you need that. You can put that in the search bar or the item number. I would imagine it'll pull it right up for you. You know, you might be able to use some kind of interfacing. Again, just be careful with your iron. Make sure that it's breathable. Make sure it's not too porous. These lovely furnace filters, if you're planning on making masks in bulk and you want really good protection, these come from Granger.com, which is a local Illinois company. I'm from the Chicago area. It comes 50 in a box, so you get a lot, 50, 20 by 20 by 1 inch. You get a lot of these, so it's going to last me a long time, and that's why I can easily give away 3 of these with every mask that I'm giving away. That is the item number. They're about $1.06 a sheet is what it works out to, and you get 50 in a box, so you're going to spend, you know, $50 plus shipping. My shipping was inexpensive because we're local, but that is another source for this. But I've heard vacuum cleaner bags cut up make good filters. I don't know because I have a bagless vacuum cleaner. Just use you put your thinking cap on and see what you can come up with. So again, just to reiterate what you're cutting: your cotton topping, a 7-inch by 10-inch piece, and a 5 1/4 by 1.5 inches for the twist tie insert. Your lining piece, 5 by 10 and 3 by 10. That allows for some overlap there. You might want to make those widths a little bit bigger if you have to put in something along the raw edge where the pocket will be. And your elastic, you'll either need 2 7-inch lengths or 4 7-inch lengths if you're using the thinner jewelry type elastic to make it sturdy enough. And that's all for today. Stay well, everybody. Wear your mask. Stay home. Thank you.